Oh God. Oh God, these chairs.
Hi, Chachaji. How
Oriental
are
chair.
you?
I love them. I I need them. I need them for my museum. I need
Hello.
these chairs for my museum back in
I'm here
Kleptostan, my
taking picture
museum
of
where
you now
the
online.
kleptomaniacs just love everything they discover. And I've just discovered this for my museum, these wonderful, wonderful Oriental chairs. They need a name. I'm going to call them Waswo chairs because I have discovered them.
How original is that? How original.
Hi,
Okay.
Pavna. How are you?
Hello, what a
Are we
surprise.
live?
We are we live? Are we?
Is
I'm going to
everybody
click this
getting
on.
sound?
Can everybody hear me? Hello? Are people online? Are my friends there?
Yes.
Yes. Hi, everybody. We are here at Gallery Latitude 28. I'm Bhavna Kakkar, your host for the evening, and very, very honored and uh, tears in my eyes. Waswo is here, Waswo ji from Udaipur, all the way, who's here with Ganpat. And the Ganpat is somewhere around. Is he
No,
here?
Grandpa's hiding somewhere.
He's hiding somewhere.
He's
He's really
watching this
shy.
live.
But we have Mr. Tillotson, Giles Tillotson here. Would you like to say hello? Who will be joining us later after this little bit of
Just stick your
madness.
head in here. Giles,
It is the first time, so we all know that we are living in the pandemic era, and Mr. Tillotson is here all the way from Gurgaon, and this is his first outing, right, to Delhi in 5 months for us, for you, for me. So we're really grateful, and we'll be having a more serious conversation with him after this little hello hi with everybody. So I need to see who all are there.
somebody wants the laptop. There we go.
Okay.
So we want to see what everybody's drinking.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Seema.
Hi. Where is? Oh, hi, Gopika. Lovely to see all of you.
Sattu is here. I can see Satyajit. I can see Dinesh. Hi, Dinesh. Hey, good to see you. Guys, again, the chat is for everybody and not just for questions. Anybody can say hello, hi to each other.
Kanchan, hello.
All the way from Calcutta. Hello. Not all the way, really, but yeah, online from Calcutta. So, would you like to start now that everybody is eager to listen to you before then we go on to the
Hi,
panel
Suresh.
interview?
I
I
can
see
see
most of my friends here. Purna, Lena, Devnath is here. Anupama, Ashwini, hi. Hi. Yes.
মিঠু কেমন আছে?
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Oh, oh, hi, Kanchan. Can you see me? No.
Hi, Kanchan. Hi, Kanchan.
Hi, Gauri. Gauri, you are there. Yes. I can spot you.
Put your voice on, Kanchan.
Everybody is in gathering.
Hi. Sorry.
Hi,
Good to see you.
same here. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Lovely to see everybody. Hi, Waswo.
Hi, Lina.
My sister here.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Lina.
Hi, everyone.
Am I the only one having a drink or what?
You're the only one. And who else? I can
Really? I
see
mean,
India.
okay, yeah, one
Anybody
more.
else with a drink? Mitchudi?
I also have a gin.
Mitchudi?
Calling to start, Bhavna.
Oh,
Okay.
We're screaming so much.
Where exactly is Rajesh, Sony? I'm very envious.
Here I am.
I know, but I mean, where are you? I know you're there, but where are you?
I am at my favorite place every day.
Okay.
Rajesh.
Which is?
off your mics so that we don't have a lot of background noise, okay? And
राकेश जी
I'll
Rajesh,
start.
how are you?
बढ़िया मजे कर रहे हो
Where are you?
Any moment, we're just having some audio difficulties. Okay, so this is a little tour. I'm just going to explain this exhibition, which is called We Are Always Working. I'm going to start with this, which didn't make it to the wall. This is Jay Prakash with a boa, and I do know it's a python. It's a very old work, probably the oldest work in the show from 2006, I'm going to guess. But the reason we're showing this first is this whole exhibition is about the photo studio as a stage and sort of the making of a photograph as a theatrical event, which is what studio portraiture is all about. And so when I shot this one many years ago, I always thought it looked like Jay Prakash had sort of stepped out onto the stage like in a talent show or an old vaudeville performance or something like that. And I liked that look. And it always struck me that this looks like a stage. And I realized like the photo studio is a stage. It's a stage in which a performance is enacted, the performance of the model for the photographer. Now, if we can see the other photograph real quickly, the other one. We're going to show two that aren't on the wall first, and then we're going to go to the others. Now, this is a much later photograph. This is just from, I think, a year and a half ago. This is Kashu on a brick pedestal, and it has that feeling of a stage again, much more elaborate. And Kashu is a farm worker that works out where my studio is in the village of Varga, which is 30 minutes outside of Udaipur. But he was doing some masonry work, and I had him stand up on this pedestal because I always like the idea of sort of elevating the common man and woman in some way in my photographs. There's an attempt to make them look good in some ways, you know. So I like this because it shows his hard work, shows what he does as a mason, but he's also on a pedestal in this theatrical type setting. So from there, we're going to go over here, which is actually a photograph on the wall. And this is a photograph of my friend Lena Vincent, who I think is watching today. And it's called She Was Unhappy with Her Portrait. And what it's talking about is the staging of a photograph. Because, you know, when the photographer makes a portrait, many times the photographer thinks he's made a very good portrait of somebody, but maybe the person sitting does not think so. Maybe the person is unhappy with their portrait, thinks, oh, that's really an ugly picture of me. I don't know. So I made this photo of Lena, and she's carrying these old bags with the Shiva on it and the Ganesha and a Bollywood bag and all of this in my traditional style. And then after we did this photo, it was a very hot, humid day. There were flies all over in the studio. It wasn't comfortable for Lena at all. And we were just talking, and I said, Lena, do you have the energy to do one more? Let's do one more. And she's like, oh, Waswo, not another. And I said, yeah. So I said, let's do one like you're angry with the whole situation. So we took this knife that she's holding in her hands, and I actually cut the backdrop with it. And then I photographed her again with this glare at the camera, like she was unhappy with the way she was captured. Because I think that's one thing as photography, you know, it's like what the photographer presents to the audience is not necessarily what the person photographed wants to present to the audience. So it works on that level. And once again, sort of a reference to the photo taking place as a stage. One thing I should say right away about all of these and the techniques of it is that all of these are black and white photos. They might look like they're in color. We're showing you a PDF right now. I hope to at the same time so you can see these in more detail. But all of these are black and white photographs, digital photographs that were painted by Roger Soni, who's been my collaborator for 14 years. He's a third generation Rajasthan hand colorist. His grandfather was Prabhulal Soni, and he painted for the Maharana Bhopal Singh of Mewar. And he revived his art. So it was transferred down to him through his father Lalit. And together, Rajesh and I have been working with hand-colored photography now for 14 years. But there's another artist involved here too, actually two of them, because the backdrop was painted by an artist by the name of Dalpat Singh, who's another artist I've worked with for many years. So he did the backdrop painting. And then our VJ that many people know from the miniature paintings that I do with our VJ actually came in and painted in the telescope and the birds, the two paraquota, the green parrots. So you've got this combination of collaborations coming together to make this. It's called Bump, and it's from the series The Observationist in a Stolen Garden. Many times now I'm taking on roles in my photography, and I'm sort of inserting those in some of my regular photographs like you saw at the beginning of this presentation. So it was sort of like, we actually do this sometimes. This is Kashu again, when you saw on the brick pedestal. And when he's working, sometimes we kind of accidentally bump into each other in sort of a lighthearted, awkward manner. So we captured that in a photograph with caste, class differences, of course, and all of that, west and east. So now I'm going to go over here. This is a series of 5 photographs, and this is We Are Always Working. This is actually the title pieces in the exhibition. And what
Can't hear.
Bhavna, you've lost your voice. Hello.
Hello, no sound in Switzerland. Love to hear you.
No sound in Delhi too.
No sound in Goa either.
Oh, now you're making me jealous.
Oh, making me jealous.
I mean, Switzerland and Goa, and I'm sitting in Delhi in my living room.
Who am I making jealous? I can't see. I can only see.
a cousin
Ajay, that's me. Ajay. Anyway, he's
is
back.
now deceased, but my cousin used to be the art director at the Milwaukee Public Museum. His name was Ed Green, and he was in charge of directing artists to paint the backgrounds to dioramas. And so he was supervising teams of artists to paint dioramas, and which would go behind the stuffed animals and things. And at a certain point in my photography, I'd never really thought about that, but at a certain point, am I kind of doing that subconsciously, not even realizing it? So I thought I just wanted to confront this issue head on, and I said, okay, let's make dioramas. So I made things where I was sort of inserting myself into an exhibit. So once again, the idea of the staged photograph and the place of photography as a stage. So I'm in here with my calipers measuring this matka. But this man who's a friend, Siraj is in the back with a vacuum cleaner, vacuuming the backdrop. And he's here again holding I think they call it a hoot, which cuts the bamboo. And so you're not sure if he's live, but it almost seems like he might be a wax display in the museum. Then we move to the next one. This is the third in the series, and once again, I'm in the role of the museologist. This is actually my landlord, Ram Singh, and Ram Singh is really a nice guy. Everybody in the Varda Village studio are wonderful people, but he played along, and he let us cover him with plastic, like he's a display in a museum, and we're covering him up while the display is being cleaned. So you have Jay Prakash in the back with his broom sweeping the painting on the back wall while I'm examining things. So we're playing with this whole idea of creating dioramas within a museum. And, it fits with the We Are Always Working because we are always working. The whole team. I collaborate with several artists, as many people know, and even as I'm talking now, probably Dalpat is back in Udaipur working on something if he's not watching this with us at this point. These are the last 2 in that series. Pretty much the same sort of theme again. If you come to the gallery, you can see these in person, but I think hopefully you're seeing these on the PDF right now. These are the last 2 in that series. Now, I've appeared in different roles. So sometimes I appear as the Orientalist, which is sort of a very, well, what I wanted to do with the Orientalist figure, because the Orientalist, I feel, in literature and academia, the Orientalist has become a caricature. The Orientalist has become just as much of a stereotype as the people that the Orientalists once studied. So I sort of wanted to play with the character of the Orientalist in a satirical, semi-humorous manner to show that, well, these Orientalists were people too. They weren't all identical. They related to India or whatever countries on different levels of interaction. Some of them not in such a good way, and in other ways maybe much more intimate and much more playful. So I'm taking on that character. But then in this series over here, so we have to go way back in this corner, this is a series of 10 small ones. They were preliminary images that we created before we started producing some larger versions of this. And this is called The Observationist at Leisure in a Stolen Garden. So the difference between the Orientalist is being very academic and exploring and discovering and archiving and referencing and all of that. The observationist is more me. The observationist is a person who is in a different country, enjoying, I will use these horrible words, the exotic, fruits and gardens of the country, the stolen gardens, and just really having a good time, maybe that brings up some negative connotations in some people's minds, but maybe that's just the way it is. So here the observationist he's got his tools though still, like the telescope. Here he's drinking under a tree with this beautiful boy who's my friend Jay from Udaipur posed for this photograph, and it's actually a photograph that references an early miniature of ours called Pani. In this next one, I've got butterflies landing on me, and it's almost as if I'm just so happy and in love with this country that the butterflies are landing on me, and I just enjoy at being here. And I just want to talk a little bit about the idea of a stolen garden, because the stolen garden, the title of these, it just doesn't reference stolen as in reference to colonialism, but it also references stolen in that we actually stole the images for the backdrops that Dalpat painted. We stole them from old vintage miniatures. Some of them are in museums like the Harvard Museum or the Victoria and Albert Museum, whatever. So they literally are stolen gardens that have been put in my artwork. And then, of course, I live in Udaipur, so we do a lot of Udaipur imagery, such as this one with the crocodile and I'm being shocked in a playful manner. I like to insert humor. The next one, I'm stuffed with straw, like I'm a scarecrow, with the Haratota touching me. This one's one of my favorites, the ones with the butterfly net, and I'm capturing butterfly. And there actually isn't this image on the wall, but it's hanging in the office. It's a bigger version of this. But there's one where I'm standing looking out on a veranda with the butterfly net, and I'm holding a butterfly on the tip of one finger. And to me, that it sort of represents this quandary about whether or not that butterfly that I'm holding, am I just admiring its beauty, as an observationist, or am I going to trap him in the net as an Orientalist and archive him and classify him in some manner? So it's like that moment of decision between just admiring the beauty of a living thing and wanting to capture that living thing and classify it in some way for science. This one, I don't know if they have an image with. I'm looking at my Rolleiflex. As many of you know, I went all through India in my early years, my first number of years in India, which goes way back to 1993, believe it or not, but starting more in 2000 with my Rolleiflex shooting sepia film. And then this one where I'm at play again, reaching up, grabbing for mangoes and filling a basket of mangoes, and there's so much abundance, the mangoes have just fallen down below. And then, of course, I'm also paddling. And in this one, we actually cut out the plywood props. This isn't just painted by RVJ. RVJ has painted on here. He's painted the fish. He's painted the bird. Roger Sony has hand-colored the background, of course. And our VJ always paints on the red tie in this type of series where I insert myself. You know, a lot of people have followed my work over the years and they don't know that I've been doing this kind of thing as well as more this. This is more my standard. This is from what I would call my Studio in Rajasthan series. This is called Monsoon Shower. And to make this photograph, we actually shot this photograph in the lake in Udaipur. So we actually went out with 2 big metal poles and a bamboo pole to hold the backdrop. And we shot it in the lake very quickly because the water tends to seep into the backdrop and get it all wet. And it's one of the few photos that I added. I did some Photoshop on to blend, you know, the backdrop into the actual water of the lake. But what I did now in the new series, I sort of mocked myself, and that's part of what I often do. I'll go back to my photography or my art, and I'll like re-examine it, and I sort of parody my own art sometimes. So this one here, I'm in the pose that Deepak is in, looking so gorgeous in that monsoon shower, but here I am showing all my fatness and grotesque body, also doing a monsoon shower. Now this is, do you like this one? Oh, good. And this one is heavily painted by Rakesh because he did all this lake work down on the bottom. So let's just continue on. I think we did this.
Live guest. Did you meet Rahul?
Yeah, Rahul is here. Rahul, walk in. Hi, Rahul. How are you?
You were with each other.
I can bump. How are you doing? What are you doing here?
Well, you frowned first, saying that I'm not supposed to be here, but Bhavna said it.
Oh, Bhavna said you could come. Okay. You know, as long as
Hi, Waswo.
can you use that phone?
Vasu, can you hear me?
These sculptures are done by Shamlal Kumar, and they're terracotta pieces that I was actually preparing for an exhibition about 2 years ago, and it was going to be a much larger installation. Never quite got finished, but I really wanted to have some sort of presence of the villagers here, you know, in the show, and so we took Shamlal Kumar's pieces that he made in my direction. I told him what I wanted, basically, and he handled the clay and fired things on his own. And then we painted them. It was Dalpat painted them with white, and also did the gold leaf on the bangles, the bracelets, etc. So once again, they're very collaborative works, and they're quite charming. I was surprised how So I think we should go in the back room. My throat is getting hoarse. But here we have Gilles Tillotson. Hi, Gilles. How are you? So Gilles is waiting to ask me some questions and give some comments on this show. So he's going to get mic'd up. I'm going to sit down. I hope everybody's enjoying watching this.
Yes, it's so amazing. Wish we can be there.
Congratulations.
Just let me have a little sip because I'm hoarse right now. Can somebody bring me some water, maybe?
Congratulations on putting together another very engaging series. This new series, We Are Always Working.
Thank you.
Shown here along with bits and pieces from other recent periods of your work. I perhaps inevitably look at them a bit with the eyes of an art historian, and sort of layering, historical layering the work. So I wondered if we could start by talking a bit about those, because I mean obviously the very fact that you're producing painted photographs is inevitably, at least for an art historian, a reference back to a period a little over 100 years ago when it was actually quite a prominent form of art practice across India. But also the way in which you photograph some of the portraits, the single portraits, also seem to evoke much earlier periods of photography, going back to the beginnings of photography in India, back to the 1860s and 70s and so on.
Just through the medium or through the...
Well, I was going to try and explore that with there's a sort of visual reference, I think, and I wanted to, in a sense, how conscious that is. So I might start, for example, with the use of painted backdrops, which of course is a very common feature in studio photography of the late 19th century. And it's not just the fact that you use a painted backdrop in so many, but the way in which you use it. So this lovely picture here, for example, which I think you call The Lady from Another Village, in which she just sort of walked into your studio. So you've got this very fine painted backdrop in the background, but also you've got these real objects in the foreground. There's almost sort of continuity between the two. You've got real plants and you've got straw on the ground, and you've got to, as an observer, you've got to pick out exactly what's fake and what's real, what's painted, what's artificial, and what's real. Though at another level, it's all artificial. And this is exactly a technique that was used by photographers working in India in the late 19th century. And so and it's an interesting technique, I think, because it also there's an element of irony in it, in the sense that it's drawing attention to the artificiality. Here is photography, the most naturalistic, the most realistic of art forms, and yet you puncture the reality by drawing attention to the difference between that which is artificial and that which is real. So is this something that have you studied historical photography and then thought, oh, that's a good technique?
I've studied photography, of course, in the US and also in Italy. I studied for a bit, but I've just always loved vintage photographs. I'm totally enamored with vintage old album and prints, even old daguerreotypes, tintypes, whatever. I've used to do all of my own processing in my own darkroom back in the US at one point. And my initial love was sepia photography. So my early exhibitions were all silver gelatin prints that were sepia toned. And when I exhibited them here in India, I got in some trouble with that because those exhibitions were held in like 2002, 2003, when India was becoming this rising tiger like China. And nobody wanted to be held in the past. So the fact that I used sepia tone triggered a lot of people, actually. It's like, well, why are you holding India back in this the word nostalgic universe? But, my argument was that sepia toning photographs at one time was considered a very new method, and it was brought in. I mean, people didn't always look at sepia tone and think of them as nostalgic. It was invented as a way to archivally preserve a print, and it was felt that those rich brown tones were much more beautiful than a plain black and white. And I do like plain and white black and white photography, but I also just love those luscious chocolatey tones of a nice sepia tone photo. And I've done the same, in Australia, New Zealand, and Italy, and other places I photographed. But here it caused a bit of a problem. So when I went into the studio situation in Udaipur, partially it was to get away from the questions of whether or not I posed and paid my models, who were the confrontation portrait people that I was doing on the streets, because that was such a weird question to me. There's no real right answer to that, because posing models and paying models is like, well, that's part of photography from the early days.
But obviously, although this is a digital photograph, right?
This is a digital photograph.
So obviously, there's a huge difference in a technical difference, in the sense that a 19th century photograph would have to be posed and staged, because the exposure time is so long that the model has to be told to stand still.
Well, there's several things.
But this is obviously equally not a candid image. But what I was really trying to get at is whether the visual allusions, if you like, to historical practice are things that you've consciously thought through, that you've looked at particular examples and thought, there's something I can use, or whether it's more subconsciously assimilated.
It's been conscious, but I don't know if I could articulate it in any real sense. I mean, there's a certain sense of wanting to, I'll use the word imitate, the feel of a vintage photograph. Now, I don't know if I could articulate all the strategies that are done to use that. But, one of the things that was just like this brilliant development in our life when I moved to Udaipur was starting to work with Rajesh.
Very muffled. We've got some messages. So maybe you can tap it a little, or maybe
I don't know.
Yeah?
I don't know what we can do.
Yeah, you can just hold it up.
I don't know if this will help.
Yeah, this will help.
Does this help?
Does this help?
Bhavna, we can hear you fine, actually.
Is it both of us as well?
Is there a sound problem still or no?
Yeah, no.
Not at all, actually.
And sometimes it's their own connection, but.
Better?
Yes, hello, hello. Okay.
Are you completely okay?
Let's take this one as an example then. If you just show this as an amazing
it's called
picture
the
here.
mutiny.
Yeah. So obviously there's a lot of fun going on here. But so are you deliberately thinking when you stage a thing? Obviously, it's just a bit of the an end of day fun, getting your assistants to murder you, but as you do, or are you actually thinking? Intentionally referring to the tableau vivant, the idea of the 19th century.
Oh, well, we've
photograph,
made several tableau vivant. I mean, we've been doing that since almost the beginning. I don't only do solo portraits, although that's probably the majority of it. But in this particular case, I mean, I respond a lot to my own experiences in life, and working with a collaborative team. Sometimes everything is happy and rosy, and sometimes there's fights, and sometimes it's like we just want to kill each other because issues come up, as we work together, because I have to function as a boss, basically. Sure. I always say I'm the leader of the rock band. So it was a play on that. I would say, well, let's do one where, you guys are all attacking me, and we'll call it the mutiny. I mean, it was a very playful thing. Yeah. But, the boys who were out there that day, and the one on the far right is Jay Prakash, who was still my assistant at the time. And the other three are models that are also often come out and pose for me when I make these pictures. They just jumped into it with a relish. They really liked the idea of the mutiny. So they had a lot of fun doing this, and I had a lot of fun posing it. But it is a reference to the tableau vivant. Yeah. I mean, all of these are references to older studio photography. But the point I'm trying to make, Giles, is that I think that through working with Rajesh Soni on digital paper, on a black and white digital print, and then also combining that with Rakesh's painting sometimes, we come up with something that has a very contemporary feel. Oh, absolutely. It's vintage. It's playfully vintage, but it's also contemporary. Yeah. So actually, this one makes that point very well, because there's a lot of different artists contributing to this work. So in one sense, it's a throwback to the old workshop technique, as it were, of an 18th century court practice, but it is done in a contemporary idiom. So just talk us through it. So the number of artists. So first of all, you've got one artist who's painted the backdrop. Okay, I found a photograph of, this is actually the gateway in Jaisalmer that opens up to the lake in Jaisalmer. Yeah, do you know the name of it? Okay. It's Gadisa, Gadisa. And I gave the photograph to Dalpat Singh Jingar, who's often paints our backdrops. Sometimes he also helps with the miniatures these days. And so he painted the backdrop on a linen cloth. We normally use linen, not canvas, though we have used canvas on occasion. The reason I like the linen cloth, Giles, if you look in the upper left, you've got a couple streaks coming down, and I like the ripples in the linen, because the ripples sometimes create the shade that gives the effect of sunlight coming down, which is really special to me. So anyway, the photograph is made by me. Now when I'm doing a self-portrait like this, I set everything up. We do a lot of tests on it. I have Ganpad or Jay Prakash pushing the button on the camera that I have set on a tripod, and I have it all positioned just the way I want it to be. I'm not the button pusher, but I definitely have constructed the shot. And then, we decide what's the best pose. And Jay Prakash actually became quite good, and Ganpat too, of helping me, just like when we're photographing people, because when people model for you, sometimes the best shots are when they're just relaxed and being themselves. Sometimes you really have to guide them, but it's still like shooting on the street in some ways, because you still have to know the right moment to make the click, to capture it. So you've got an artist who's done the backdrop. You've got you who's taken the photograph. Then Rajesh Soni hand coloring. So in fact, the coloring that we see in the backdrop is not the original color of the backdrop, because you photographed it in black and white. Oh no, not at all. It'd be much more like a normal color photograph. To me, much more garish. I don't like the color look at all. The color that you see is actually is added, and then
telescope wasn't there at all. That's actually painted by
No,
Vijay.
that's our Vijay, whose full name is Rakesh Vijay Varghia, because he's related to Ram Gopal Vijay Varghia of painting fame from Jaipur.
Yeah.
And our Vijay came in and did the telescope. Also, there's a hint of a red tie. He generally paints a red tie on all of these photos.
So you've got
also.
4 artists, and is the gold border by yet another artist?
The gold border is sometimes done by yet somebody else, though lately the gold borders have been done by Dalpat. But there's also a man whose name is Sanju, who sometimes does our gold leaf for us. But he's part of the whole Karkhana. You know, our Karkhana has really expanded because the original collaborators were Rajesh Soni and RBJ. And we've been working together now. I would say the first 10 years it was just Rajesh and Rakesh and I. But then after that, we started bringing in other people. You know, like Shankar Kumawat is another one who on our miniatures does the beautiful miniature border work. You know, he's part of our Karkhana too. So it's a group of people that I collaborate with to make these.
I've got to ask you a question about architecture, of course, because that's a particular thing of mine. So there are a number of very clear visual references to particular buildings. I mean, a lot of them obviously have images of Udaipur, particularly the Lake Palaces. Here we have the Gadisar at Jaisalmer, and there's another one actually, one from the new series, which is also depicts the same place. So are these just places that you like, or is there some intended
I have an emotional connection. I mean, I've lived in Udaipur. I've visited Jaisalmer many times. So yeah, I have an emotional connection with Rajasthan. And I think all of our images, with the exception of none in the show, we did do a couple hand-colored photographs that used a backdrop that had some sort of Mughal monuments from outside of Delhi. I'm not sure which one, but that was an outlier. Generally, they're always from Rajasthan, and I'm very sure that the images that we create, and sometimes they're just created out of the mind. Sometimes I just tell Dalpat, I want you to paint a landscape with this or that, and he'll do it.
But it's part of the, and we want to get to the Orientalism point in a moment, it's part of the kind of Orientalist or, inverse Orientalism that what you're focusing on is traditional local architecture. You wouldn't do a backdrop of a Le Corbusier or...
No. We wouldn't do that. However, we did do a project down in Tiruvannamalai in Tamil Nadu, and we did a backdrop specially for that. And we did do a project one time in Goa, which was called Long Timers, and it was about old hippies. It was one of the few times I actually photographed other foreigners, long timers, the old hippies. And we did like three special backdrops just for Goa that had palm trees and churches in it and things like that were recognizably Goan images.
So there's another question, a slightly different angle I wanted to ask you about the unique nature of the work, and this actually also relates to the teamwork, the fact that they're really paintings. I mean, they're painted photographs, because photography has always had this slightly ambivalent position within the arts. Partly, I think, because it's so reproducible. Because how do you reproduce things through photography? But a photograph is already a photograph, and so there's a sense in which the photograph as a work of art is infinitely reproducible. I mean, it's the same thing.
Right.
Though obviously you can photograph it on different, you can reproduce it or print it on different scales and on different papers and so on and so forth. But it is always itself. And so, a photograph by Raghu Rai, for example, is that photograph wherever you see it, even if you're seeing it in a magazine. Whereas you're returning photography to the idea of the work of art as the individual unique item, which is something that photography had shattered. Do you see an irony in that?
I have problems when people invite me actually to like photo fests and things which happen. And sometimes I get these very late invitations and they say, oh, just send the file and we'll print it ourselves. And it's like, well, it doesn't work that way with our photographs. Because I was always taught, even with just making silver gelatin prints, black and whites or sepia, we were always taught that half the work was in the darkroom. And, I was the old school photographer who was sort of the black and white purist at one time, that every tone had to be just perfect within the print, and I was fanatical about getting every little spot out that didn't belong there, and dodging and burning and all of that. And I still I've loosened up a lot on that level. I'm no longer so, I want to say anal. I'm no longer so obsessed with that. But I still have this feeling that the print is an object. You know, that this a photograph is just not an image that you've captured on a cell phone. A photograph is something that's been printed, it's been made, it has a luster. And like all of these photographs, I always say, if you don't see them in real life, they're not the same, you know, because when you see them on the computer, when you see them even in a book, and we have some books out, but, you know, even in the books, I never feel they look as beautiful as in real life, because in real life, you see all the gradients, all the tones. You know, the paper itself has sort of a satiny luster to it, and that's very hard to translate.
There was also the great diversity of size, the scale.
Yeah, and the scale,
you have to come to the gallery if you can to see these. So let's talk a bit about the larger theme that we've been skirting around, and that you've been you touched on in the rapid tour of thing. The use of humor, of a rather self-deprecatory self-satire as an anti-Orientalist strategy. And I suppose the obvious question that one has to, because you talk about the trajectory, about the criticism of your early work and your response to that, and the response was not, as it were, to go to another extreme, but to embrace the idea of Orientalism and to turn it into something, and turn it into a form of self-satire. Is it working? Is the obvious question. But is it working as a strategy that you had a sense, there's a hint even in the wall text here of a feeling of exclusion, of otherness imposed upon you because the difficulty of getting into an art environment as an outsider. So is the humor of these works working as a strategy, as it were? Do you feel you're getting a better critical response?
There's a lot to that question. I feel I've gotten a better critical response. You know, it's been crescendoing, and I get a better critical response all the time. I feel I'm much more accepted in the Indian art scene than I was in 2002, 2003, or 2006, even 2008 when we had some of our first shows of this series.
I mean, it's partly because you've been around such a long time. You're an institution by now.
You can make that become institutionalized.
Yeah, you're ready to have a plaque put on you by now.
Yeah, probably I deserve a plaque put on me at some point. But no, I think that the humor opens it up. It humanizes. I mean, the whole idea, everything I do in my artwork tries to humanize. And I think we live in such a horrible time right now where worldwide, everybody's so polarized and everybody is constructing stereotypes of the other in some way. And it's coming from all directions. I'm not talking politically one side or the other or one country or the other, whatever. I mean, people just are obsessed with this stereotyping, polarizing narratives. Constantly, in the way of viewing other people.
Both your country and mine, our countries of origin. Yeah.
Right. Well, it's even going on here to some extent, you know. Yeah. I can't talk about it, but, you know, I won't, but it certainly is going on here as well. Humor is something that really breaks down barriers to me. And I'm a great free speech advocate, you know, and I'm diverging a little bit, but I mean, one of the things about humor is it makes people laugh about things, and it actually brings people closer. When people feel like they're othered in some way, sometimes the thing that breaks that othering is simply laughing together about something. And sometimes that ends that wall, breaks that barrier, and brings people together. So I think through not only these photographs, but also the miniature series that has an incredible amount of humor in it. People who are familiar with that miniature series, that has done a lot also. So, you know, an article was written about me recently that was referred to me as the insider outsider. And that's the way I kind of feel. I'm sort of the outsider in my art, but in some ways I've become an insider in the art world to some extent. Not totally. There are still groups of people who obviously have issues with what I do and issues with my art. But in general, I feel much more accepted.
But it's more difficult to be po-faced about wit, is the point. You know, I mean, to counter wit with.
And, you know, I never poke fun at other people. You know, if you look at any of my images, the satire and the humor is always directed at myself. You know, so it's a self-deprecating humor, which is something the British ought to understand. Self-deprecating humor, I think.
Yeah.
But, you know.
Well, 3 cheers to wit and to humor. Do you want to invite some questions?
We should have some questions from the crowd.
Do you want to curate
Charles.
that? Yeah. So I'm going to pass this to you.
No, actually, I would prefer that people ask the questions themselves. Wait, am I audible? Yeah. Hello.
As people ask questions, I do have one.
Yeah, if anybody has a question, please just ask.
Yeah.
So, Waswo, you've been around in India for now, what, about 20 years?
If you count from when I kind of moved here, 20 years.
About 20 years, right?
You know, my first time in India was 1993, so that goes back a whole lot longer.
Yeah, a lot more.
But since I was living here 20 years, right?
Right. And as a practicing artist and contributing to the art scene about 18, 20 years, right?
Right.
So why do you still feel the otherness and being an outsider at all? I think you're one of the most sought after artists as far as your works are concerned. You're written on, you're loved, respected, and hated, which is an integral part of our art world, right?
Right.
So I think all of that put together. So why are you an outsider now? I think you're more Indian than
Well,
American.
that's the whole thing. Am I an outsider or am I an insider? But I think because of the direction that my art took, you know, the thing you have to realize that the character in the photo at some point ceased to be me. You know, he stopped being me and he became sort of a caricature that represented me. He became his own man, especially a common man, you know, especially in the miniatures and now in the photographs. So when you look at these, it's not always about Waswo. It's about, you know, the foreigner in India, or maybe it's about in these, some of these, like the We Are Always Working ones might be about the foreigner in India, you know, 100 years ago. You know, so it's not always me personally, but the theme continues, you know. So does that answer your question? Okay.
So there's a question from Georgina, and I've asked.
Hi, Georgina.
Shubha, can you unmute everybody in any case? Yeah, I'll read out this question in the meantime. Would you like to talk a little about the homoerotic element in the works, which I love reading as a subtext, taking off also from our innocent discovery and meeting and identifying commonalities? This is from Georgina.
I think Georgina. Yeah, I'm gay, and you know, I've gone into this before sometimes. When I was younger in the U.S., I was very active in gay rights movements, and you know, I came out to my parents as gay way back in 1968, when that just like wasn't done. That wasn't done in Midwestern America, you know, at that time. So I have a long history. I helped organize with a man named Bill Piero. He organized the first gay pride parade in Milwaukee. I stood up and testified in front of the state legislature. So I was a bit of an activist for those things in my youth. But as I grew and, you know, the gay rights movement progressed and developed, I felt like, well, at least in the West, we pretty much got everything we wanted. Gay marriage exists in every state of the union in the U.S. So when I came here, I was ready to put all that stuff behind me. I think one reason that I clicked in the India art world and got some notice from the beginning was because I did have very obvious elements of homoeroticism in my art and in the miniature. So you know, I think that in the early days, I think some people gravitated towards my art because I was openly gay. But like I just recently said, talking in an interview with somebody else, I mean, at this point in my life, my homosexuality to me is a footnote because my identity is being an artist. My identity is being somebody who works with painters. My identity is somebody who is a photographer, somebody who writes. My identity is somebody who lives in India. There's a lot of things that take precedent above and beyond being gay. So being gay now for me is way, way down. It's sort of a footnote to my existence. And that's all I can say. Okay, Georgina? Georgina, we're gonna interview you on Evil O soon, by the way. Just so everybody knows. Another question?
Any other question?
Just to take up Georgina's point. So while you're here, Indra, there's a wonderful image here of self-portrait of Waswo in drag, which is terrific. And the photograph above him of talking of the homoerotic theme, the photo above the image above Waswo's head of a group of people in a cornfield has elements of erotic and indeed of high camp, which are just hilarious, I think. At the risk of getting your exhibition closed down, Bhavna, I
It won't be.
Thank you.
Rajesh, come in and talk about your hand coloring a little bit.
Okay,
Can we bring in Rajesh? Are you there?
Rashid has just joined.
Yes.
Hi.
Hi. I'm here.
Hello.
Is
How are you?
Rajesh there?
Hi, Rajesh. So I think people want to hear a
Hi.
bit about how you choose the color range that you do with
See,
a given image, because obviously with a black and white image you're free to do whatever you want. So how do you go about it? And is this I assume it's some consultation with Waswo? But you can answer it, Rajesh.
whenever I get the photographs to paint and they are black and white in my hands, so I choose the color with imagination completely, and I look at the nature around me for idea. Like if I want to paint a tree, leaves or grass, then I just go out and I look at the tree how they are, and then I add little bit of more of my imaginations, and then I color them up. And every image that I paint, they are unique, because it's not possible to paint exactly the same. Even the images are same, but when I color them, I can not do the like how you say, like exactly the copies. So it's not like machine, it's more like each and every stroke are different, all the image is different, and it's very unique. And it's also a layers process which takes time. And I when you paint a black and white photograph, and you are applying a yellow color on a gray, then it kind of turns into a green. So it's also challenging to play with the colors and get the right color that you need. And then Vaswa and me, sometimes we discuss, sometimes he don't like the color, then I try to find the way that how to get it done. So we do it like more experiments and a lot of things, and it has been a good collaboration from a long time now, and also a great learning.
Influence on his colors and things, but now Rajesh does it all on his own because he knows what he's doing much more than I do.
Yeah, okay, so there's, the issue of coloring is interesting, and it reminds me of artist, there's something called Kavita here. It reminds me of the, so I'll repeat the question again. There's a question from Kavita. The issue of coloring is interesting. It reminds me of the artists of the Mughal court who were looking at European engravings but producing colored versions with some references and some imagination. Comment than a question. Then Annie, Rajesh, two questions. Is this a family tradition for you or something you
Yes.
took up on your own? How
No,
do
no,
you see the difference from what you do with Waswo with Indian artists of the past painting on photographs?
Okay.
So I can answer you that it is a family tradition, like where my grandfather used to color, and I learned the techniques through my father. And working with Vaswo, it's more how to say, like learning and giving a life to a lost art, because in old tradition they used to paint on a photograph which was printed in darkroom, and now we are painting a photograph which is printed by the inkjet printers. So there's a great learning and a lot of experiments, I can say, and it is not easy to paint. So I have discovered a lot of techniques and ideas, and sometimes something you cannot do it, and sometimes it's very hard and you're confused, but somehow I found the ways and I went through that. So I feel very happy that now what we bring it, we have given a life back to an art which was lost with the modern techniques.
Yes. Okay, okay, we've answered most of the questions. Any more questions? No?
I think people
No?
should go out and party now.
Your visuals are very much Indian. Your visuals are very much Indian. How people react to your visual vocabulary in the US or other countries? Point. Good question.
Am I to answer that?
Yes. Want to?
It's really strange because when I first came here, even though, the early series I did show in India, because I was curious what Indians would think, because it was the sepia series. In my mind, in the early days, it was always like, well, yeah, I was sort of photographing to show people back home, just like any other tourist. These are clicks I'm taking for people back home.
India. Yes.
And exotic India, if you want to put it so crassly. But
that is what it is.
yeah. But something changed at some point. I think it really started with this whole studio series when I shifted with working with Rajesh. You know, the audience suddenly became Indians in my mind. I don't really care so much what foreigners think anymore, because to me, I'm having a dialogue now with my Indian audience. That doesn't mean that foreigners don't react, that they don't like, that they don't buy once in a while, blah blah blah, etc. But to me, it's being produced now for an Indian audience.
Thank you. And yes, thank you. I love the photo I own from you. Wonderful walk. So sorry, can't travel to India now. Yes, we're all sorry about that. So should we now just open it, say bye to everybody?
Yeah, I think we just say goodbye. Everybody come on and say goodbye if we can do that. And we'll finish this.
So can we unmute
Bye. Thank you very much.
and Rafiq, laptop.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, Bhavna. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Where's the wine? Where's the wine?
Thank you.
Can you unmute?
We need more
Cheers.
wine. We need one last cheers with everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bhavna, my wine is still here.
Empty glass.
मेरा glass लेके आओ.
Bhavna, where's your glass?
Cheers to all.
Bhavna.
Okay, 1 second. Let me just set this up. Okay.
Hello, Bhavna. Hi.
Bye, everyone.
Somebody has to put it back in that grid pattern.
Yes.
Wonderful show.
So yes, here we
Well
are.
done.
Yes. Lots of people here. You need to come here.
Waswo, it's a wonderful show, sir.
And
Congratulations.
okay.
Okay, so we want to say goodbye and thank you all for coming. I see Tommy. Hi, Tommy.
Hi.
Kaka
Would
G.
you like to tell
Kaka
everybody?
Ji,
Kaka, you want to say a couple words?
No, I just saying good night.
Tommy is Waswo's partner.
He doesn't have a sound on.
Oh, he doesn't have a sound on.
Hello.
Tommy.
He's not real
Hey,
proficient.
Oh, okay.
But Tommy, here's to you.
Cheers,
From
cheers.
Delhi. Love you. Love everybody who attended.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Thank
Bye,
you so much.
Rajesh.
Hi, Rashid.
Bye,
Bye.
Tata Ji.
How are you?
Bye,
Thank
see
you for
you.
joining in. So nice to have you here.
Bye.
Bye. How are you? I'm
Meet
glad
in
you're
the
here.
gallery and
Yeah,
like
good,
kind of
good,
Bye
good.
bye.
I'm
popped in to
glad.
say hello. I'm
Seema
so
Bala's
happy.
here. Okay, good.
So many friends. Thank you and enjoy the weekend.